Hello everyone, here I am with Dr. Vishal Lala. He is a data scientist professor at Pace University who has a bachelor's in chemistry and a PhD in marketing. He's currently a professor at Pace University for the last 15 years. How are you doing, Mr. Lala?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, that's no problem. And thank you for sitting down and taking time out your day. And I guess let's get straight into the questions. What would you say are some specific things that attracted you to apply for your position at Pace University?
I did a PhD in marketing. The natural thing to do after a PhD is to join academia.
Mm-hmm.
And Pace University was one of the few schools I interviewed with and made me an offer, so I joined.
Mm-hmm. How do you view your role in the faculty development process?
Hmm. We have a number of new faculty joining, and as they come in, they are fairly raw in teaching and research. So I play an important role in guiding them through with the process.
Right, right. And you do research and teaching, right? So you're pretty much an instructor at Pace University. So what would you say are some of your greatest strengths as an instructor, or like what should be the greatest strengths as an instructor?
Some things are a given, some things are natural. You expect any instructor to know their subject area. Domain knowledge is critically important, no doubt. But there are a number of abilities of an instructor that make them better in the classroom, such as their ability to be patient, their ability to empathize with the student, relate to them, be friendly, yet be stern,
Right.
be nice and sociable, yet be firm when it comes to deadlines, and be fair to everybody.
Mm. What do you think what do you think happens when a teacher is either too nice or too hard on a student? What effects do you think it has on the students?
Well, I've been on both sides of this, both as a student as teacher, and also been on tried both as an instructor. Uh, Going too easy may help befriend some students, but the other students actually push back at instructors, and they feel like the instructor is not professorly enough or teacherly enough when they are friendly. They actually want the distance between the teacher and the student. There are also others who will take advantage of the instructor when the instructor is too nice and too friendly.
Right.
Um, on the other hand, if you've got an instructor or a professor who's too harsh, well, then the consequences are obvious. Nobody likes people who are difficult, harsh, or too strict, or too stern. The good thing about being stern, the one thing I've noticed about professors who are stern, and trying this on my own teaching style as well, is that students don't mind you being stern or strict so long as you're the same person with everybody, therefore fair.
Right.
The right place to be is somewhere between being really friendly and the other end of the spectrum being really rigid and strict.
Right, right. And you personally, you teach machine learning in your classroom, am I right?
I teach an array of different topics. My role is in the marketing department at PACE.
Mm-hmm.
So the courses I teach involve some level of machine learning, but they're not exclusively in that domain.
Okay, okay. So in machine learning in specific, what would you say, what methods you go through with your students? Is it like you go through all of them at once, or you go through like clustering or transfer learning at specific points in the year rather than like having it being given what you should know?
Students who take my class are mostly from the business school.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say about one half are from the business school and the other half are from computer science or information systems. Therefore, they're coming from different backgrounds and have different skill sets. It is important for me to ensure that the whole class stays on the same page as we navigate through the semester. So in the early sessions when I'm teaching machine learning related topics, I tend to go slow, warming up everybody into the the culture of coding as opposed to point and click software. Warming up to the ideas of dealing with bugs, being punished for typos, These
Mm-hmm.
little things that many of us take granted for because we're spoiled with all the correct features is all new for marketing majors or um, human resources majors. For computer science students, the challenge is to make sure that they are in the fold, so to speak, even though it's too pedestrian for them in that stage.
Mm-hmm.
As we navigate through, I'll up the level, but it's very important again to make sure everybody is in the same. You don't lose anybody as you progress through the semester.
Right, right. And that's also an important part that all students are on the same page so that somebody's education is not like lacking in that they cannot be able to do it or somebody's way too ahead. So how would you what would you say some qualities are that you look for in students or that's hard to teach in students?
Um, can you say the question again?
Oh yeah. What would you say some qualities or responsibilities that students should have that should be that is hard to instill or teach in them that comes from like within?
So for learning related topics, it is important for students to be patient, be willing to persist,
Mm-hmm.
be willing to recognize the fact that not everything that they're learning is in a book. The subject is evolving rapidly. Some of the learning might come from their own exploration. Some of the learning may come from non-traditional sources like looking up or debugging a problem by finding an FAQ on Stack Overflow.
Right.
This is something that many students are not accustomed to doing.
Right. And along with that, you have different ways to teach to different kinds of classes, depending how the class is, what time it is, and what they're actually learning. So, what would you say are some different ways you personally teach and help accommodate to students? And if you can, could you give us an example of it?
So different ways I teach, is that what you're asking for
Mm-hmm.
different students?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's a tough question. Um, so if they're students who are coming from a computer science background, then focus more on the coding aspects of it, talk more about the algorithm to them. For students from a business background, focus more on the conceptual aspects and warm them up to the code. Um, the for some students who are very well versed with code, they often get so into the code they forget about the bigger picture. For them, emphasizing the bigger picture, conveying to them the importance of relating their findings to the problem that they started out with.
Mm-hmm.
For some other students, it might be conveying the bigger picture using an effective chart or a visualization.
Right, right. But alongside your teaching, you're also a researcher who researches in like consumer decision making, web and mobile marketing. So what would you say some key differences are when being a teacher of a class and being a researcher?
Research is done in the isolation of a room in front of a computer. This past semester has been pretty much the same because everything has been behind Zoom. But there's a social aspect to teaching, which doesn't exist in research. The focus in research is to identify a problem and work on it with a co-author who might, work with you periodically, mostly via email. So it's a very, very different sort of uh, different skill set required for research than for teaching.
And when we're talking about that skill set, what would that skill set be in specific?
The same things that I expect of a lot of students: so persistence, tenacity, the willingness to not expect everything to be laid out clearly in a book,
Mm-hmm.
be willing to hop around, follow hyperlinks to from one place, one research paper to another one. They think creatively.
Right. And what would you say, or how would you say that you personally had gotten interested in your field?
The research part or the teaching part.
We'll go with the teaching part first.
So I was trained essentially to be a researcher in the PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out the way that education in America works is that you join a university and you teach along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So teaching is almost like an uh, acquired interest.
Right.
It's one that grew on me. I was never trained to teach to begin with. But having been in the classroom, having taught numerous students over time, it
Mm.
sort of I grew to enjoy it.
Right. And how would you say a skill set of a researcher should be?
A researcher should be one who's curious, one
Mm-hmm.
who's willing to find an area of interest or passion and stick with it throughout until to see the paper through to its completion.
Mm-hmm. And in your research, you normally use like a lot of things that you learned in your college degrees. You had first done a bachelor's in chemistry at Xavier's University, and then you had moved on to a master's in marketing, then a PhD in marketing at Oklahoma State. So, how would you say your bachelor's in chem really helps you as a data scientist?
It doesn't directly help. Um, I think there's this famous uh, commencement speech that Steve Jobs made a couple of years ago at Stanford when he was around, where he said that, looking ahead, you can't really tell what's going to matter. It's only looking back that you can see the dots connect. And so I'm still looking for the connection of the dots back to chemistry. I haven't found that yet. But I will say this, that, I've tended to follow what excites me at a certain point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't always a clearly laid, straight, linear path. Oftentimes it involves a couple of turns. It may eventually bring you back to the same spot again. Chemistry was not one that fits into a neatly designed puzzle. Marketing and an MBA in marketing did fit, and a PhD in marketing did fit. But now I'm focusing a lot on machine learning issues and teaching those sorts of subjects.
Right.
That didn't quite fit with either marketing or chemistry. So to answer your question directly, they don't all fit neatly.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And wait, when you had actually done your bachelor's in chemistry, were you just like doing it as like you were interested in chemistry and that's why you did it? Or was you going down a different path and then you got interested in marketing and then it went down marketing?
Uh-huh. So psychology got me excited about marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and that was from chemistry.
That's
Figuring out people is what excited me while doing chemistry. That took me away from chemistry. I learned that very quickly that psychologists don't have a good career. That led me into marketing because somebody told me that if you apply psychology to humans in a business setting, it's called marketing. That makes a lot of money. So it's very kind of a very simple, elementary kind of thinking at that stage
mm-hmm.
that led me into marketing. Um, and from there on, I ended up reading the Philip Kotler book that your father might tell you about, which I went through maybe about 10 times through and through, end to
Mm-hmm.
end. I was really excited about marketing. And the human part about marketing, the consumer behavior part was most exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
After working for a year at, a company called LB, which is now part of UPS in India, I felt that I wanted to dig deeper. That led me to do a PhD.
Right. And that really just helped you that helped you like propel yourself into like, marketing and teaching and researching.
One thing led to the other. I followed sort of like you can think about it as rather than looking at GPS holding a flashlight in your hand and walking through a dark lane, you're looking 6 feet ahead and making a decision of where to go.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's always like the best, just to follow your interests and go where you need to, rather than just like following the money, which also helps. So like that's something else. And as a researcher, you gather data and analyze it to see if any actual insights can actually be made. So could you give us an example of where you had actually collected data and a person or company had made an actual action due to the data you presented?
It's an interesting question because a lot of academic research doesn't actually make it to the business domain for many, many years.
Oh.
The process works something like this. Some professor will work on a research paper, will publish it. Somebody else will replicate that work, or publish related work.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, there's like this corpus of knowledge created that some company might pick up on from a Harvard Business Review article that summarizes all the research in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then it might go into action. So the process might take 5, 10 years to eventually make its way into business practice.
Oh.
Some of the work that I've done, I'll give you an example of one of the papers that is top of mind right now. We were curious to find out if kids learn from their parents on how to shop, and if that has a bearing on their shopping behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
We're also curious to see if this learning, is it learning or is it genetic? So that, let's say, take yourself for instance. Would you be a more frugal shopper because your parents are frugal, let's say, hypothetically speaking?
Mm-hmm.
If that is because of your observation of their frugal shopping behaviors, or if that's sort of embedded in your DNA and therefore you're predisposed to doing that.
Right.
We examined data on twins. So we found a set of twins, about um, 150 pairs of twins.
Mm-hmm.
And we surveyed them all on their deal proneness, how likely they are to shop when there's a deal or a really good price on a product. We found out that it turns out that you know some of these forces are indeed genetic.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these predispositions are indeed genetic, and so your genes have as much of a role to play in your shopping preferences as learning at home. And that was our interesting takeaway, is that some of the marketing predispositions or consumer predispositions are indeed genetic.
Oh, that's actually quite interesting because normally you would think that a person would make observations and then make a decision on that. You wouldn't think that somebody buys something and it's just in the genetics that they're more pulled towards a certain thing. So in your survey, in your study, you had done a survey among many twins, right? So how was a way that you reduced bias in surveying and gathering this information?
So the assumption that we let me explain a bit more about the twin study to kind of get to your question. We were looking at twins in particular because twins present an interesting ecosystem to work on for our study,
Mm-hmm.
because there are two kinds of twins, monozygotic and dizygotic. The identical ones are monozygotic
Mm-hmm.
and the fraternal ones are dizygotic.
Okay, okay.
Monozygotic twins share much more DNA than dizygotic twins do. In a sense, monozygotic twins are very similar in terms of genetic makeup, and
Mm-hmm.
dizygotic twins are they're very dissimilar
Mm-hmm.
in terms of genetic makeup.
Right, right.
So we were looking at similarity across the twins between monozygotic and dizygotic twins,
Mm-hmm.
seeing which ones were more similar and at what stage of their life.
Mm-hmm.
We found out in general, monozygotic twins were more similar than dizygotic twins. Since twins have the same upbringing, you'd expect that the learning from watching their parents would be identical
Right.
or very similar.
Mm-hmm.
That led us to believe that there's a genetic component to this thing.
Right.
Now, your question was about bias.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about bias is we assume that bias is, if there is any bias, and there's no doubt going to be some level of bias in our methods, is
Mm-hmm.
uniform, whether you're looking at monozygotic or dizygotic. There's some level of bias. There's no reason to believe there's more response bias or survey bias for monozygotic and dizygotic. So we're hoping if there is any bias, it'll cancel out.
Right. That's fair enough because you're dividing them into two, and then you're getting results from each and every one. They're comparing them with each other. And how would you say that how long did the study actually like last? How many months or years?
2.5 years.
That's a long time.
It takes a long time to gather data from twins, because it's not like you've got a line of twins, waiting to give you data.
Right.
So we gather data from Rutgers University Registrar's Office.
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers University has a database of all their students.
All right.
Based on their age, their last name, we made inferences about who may be a twin or
Mm-hmm.
maybe twins. We reached out to them by via email requesting to join our study. We'd request, let's say, 10 of them, one pair would agree. It only makes sense if both twins agree to completing the survey.
Right. Doesn't really
We
make
offer them an
sense.
incentive, yeah. We offer them an incentive $10 a person
Mm-hmm.
to fill out the survey. And ultimately, over a span of about 2 years or so, 2.5 years, we
Mm-hmm.
got about 140 pairs of twins.
Dang, that's a lot. That's a lot. I'm guessing that was a lot of trial and error too, where like people were like, no, I'd rather not, and then like some people said yes, I'd rather do that with the incentive. And along with this research project, do you have any upcoming research projects that you're thinking about or that are currently in the works?
A couple in the works. I've been more excited about recently about looking at what we can do with text data. So I've been looking at a lot about what people are saying in reviews and how what kind of bearing that has on. Uh, so can we learn a lot from the structure of what people are saying in Amazon reviews or on Yelp reviews and so on. So a lot of text analysis. That's been a recent focus of mine. A related paper, the most recent paper I worked on in that domain was looking to see if we can identify what kind of humor works on Twitter. We evaluated tweets based on the number of favorites or retweets a tweet got.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took the text apart. We had somebody code all the text based on identifying what kind of humor it had. We picked about 18,000 tweets. And then we had to reduce a number based on, you know, reducing it to tweets that were in English, occurred during a certain time period, involved a certain consumer brands. We picked 50 consumer brands to use. And then also we narrowed it down based on tweets that didn't have images.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to see the text and see what implication the text had on people's on the retweets or favorite counts of the tweets.
Right.
So we categorize them then based on, again, is this tweet, is this a humor type A, type B, C, D, E, F, so on and that, and
Mm-hmm.
then connected the dots to figure out what kind of humor makes a tweet get retweeted or favorited.
Right. And how do you think experience plays a role in research conducting? Because you personally have done many studies, including some in Mexico, wondering the relative frequency of where people shop or how big name companies can affect small companies in the local area. So how would you think experience really helps you like digress on how to conduct an experiment and how to examine the results from there?
Well, experience teaches you to anticipate problems you might have with the study.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Things like a method bias issue or an analysis related issue. One thing that experience teaches you is that, again, which are the best practices to use. You also learn from going through the review process. When submitting a paper to journal, reviewers come back with comments. Having seen comments and rejections before, or requests to revise a paper before, I know what a reviewer is expecting. That helps then anticipate these in advance and make sure my designs are more robust.
Right, right. And along with, again, you do both researching and teaching. And how would you say your work-life balance is?
Um, uh, could you be more specific? Like, what do you mean by saying?
So like, is it like is it like a lot of time where you have to take your work home and work hours at home finishing like grading papers or like going through results, examining, etc.?
Yeah, it's about figuring out the times for time research and teaching. I have days that I'll assign as being my research days and days that I'll assign my teaching days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People think about vacations. I don't believe in like having a set period for vacation. There's a weekend and that's it usually for me.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out times that work best for you might be figuring out that maybe the daytime is got to be spent with the kids, so you got to spend maybe work the night instead. So it's about figuring out times that work best, accommodating everything.
Right, right. And does your Space University offer any internship, research opportunities, or volunteering opportunities for high school students that are virtual? And if they do, could you explain some of them for me?
I don't know of any research opportunity that PACE offers that is virtual.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to do one of those things is to approach the professor directly and see if they have a project they're working on
Mm-hmm.
and join them in that pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
But as such, I don't know of any university that offers projects for high school students that are not directly connected to the university.
Okay.
If you join a prep program of sorts for the university,
Mm-hmm.
you may be able to join through that. You may be able to join some research project.
Oh, does Space University have a program like that?
They do. It's called the Summer Scholars Institute.
Mhm.
They run it every summer. I think months of June or July and August actually.
And how would you say, how can high school students get more involved in your field, especially like during these times?
What kind of area do you or a high schooler want to get involved in?
Let's just say machine learning and in conducting of research operations, like conducting, if they want to get more involved in research opportunities, like marketing, so.
Okay. There are a lot of self-learning opportunities available. I'd encourage you to take advantage of as many of them as possible.
Mm,
Not every You can learn a lot on your own. I mean, guidance with somebody, working with somebody else definitely helps.
mhm,
But for most university researchers, working with a high school student, unless the student has been vetted really well,
mhm,
requires a lot of input and effort from their end. They would rather have a graduate student working for them or with them.
right.
So then, for a high schooler who wants to learn, the best thing would be to again identify problems of their own, identify resources that they can learn from their on their own.
Mhm,
Um, there's a lot of opportunities on uh, let's see, websites like Kaggle, where you could join a data science competition
mhm,
and learn out there. There are a number of published articles you could read up on and attempt to replicate. The good thing about machine learning research is that much of the data is easily and publicly available.
mhm,
So you could take one step at a time, maybe pick up one of those academic papers, replicate them, um, try a twist on that. Um, and if you can take your work and then share that with some university professor, they'd be a lot more willing to mentor you or some high school student.
right. And that's like always a good way to get really invested in the field and gain more experience on such things. And yeah, those are all the questions I have for you today. Thank you for being here again. Thank you for taking time out your day, considering you for like half an hour. And if you have any questions, just email me. I'll leave my email down below. And yeah, bye.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop this now. Oops. All right. You can edit the oops out.
Hmm.
And I'll email you the link.
Yeah, that would be nice.
You look perplexed.
Yeah, because hold up. I don't know what's on. Okay, no, 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 but I got it. Okay, I don't know what I was looking at. I was looking at something else. Oh, God.
I'll send you the Zoom link in a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
Okay? It takes about